The camera sweeps across a tense, high-profile courtroom. Elon Musk sits at the defense table, a confident, knowing smirk on his face. Across the room, Justice Amy Coney Barrett adjusts her robe, her expression sharp, focused, and commanding. The energy between them crackles, a powder keg waiting for a spark. The air inside the federal courthouse was electric, heavy with anticipation. Reporters jostled for the best angles, flashes from cameras firing like lightning across the marble floors. A thick crowd of spectators had gathered, lining the corridors, eager to witness what was being called the trial of the century. Inside the packed courtroom, every seat was occupied, murmurs rolling through the room like distant thunder. At the center of it all stood Amy Coney Barrett, a figure of sharp intellect and commanding presence. Her reputation preceded her: Supreme Court Justice, a meticulous scholar of constitutional law, respected even by those who disagreed with her. Dressed in a simple yet authoritative black robe, she exuded calm, the weight of decades of legal mastery evident in her poised stance and piercing gaze. Across the courtroom, standing just as confidently, was Elon Musk. The world knew him as the tech titan, the billionaire entrepreneur who revolutionized everything from automobiles to space exploration. Charismatic, unpredictable, and relentlessly bold, Musk was no stranger to controversy. But today was different. Today, he wasn't launching rockets or tweeting bold declarations. Today, he was defending himself, his ideas, and perhaps even the future of innovation itself. There was an undeniable tension in the air. Two forces, intellect and innovation, tradition and disruption, about to collide. No one could have predicted that Amy Coney Barrett and Elon Musk would ever stand opposite each other in a legal battlefield. Yet here they were, moments away from a confrontation that promised to challenge not just legal norms, but the very direction of human progress. The world watched with bated breath. The clash of titans was about to begin. The origins of the battle traced back months earlier to a bold move made by Elon Musk's newest AI venture, Neuralite. Musk's company had developed an advanced artificial intelligence system designed to operate semi-autonomously in fields ranging from healthcare to defense. Neuralite's AI had the potential to diagnose rare diseases, manage traffic systems, and even assist in national security operations, all without direct human intervention. Musk hailed it as a leap toward a better, more efficient world. But not everyone shared his optimism. Concerns arose swiftly from lawmakers, watchdog organizations, and constitutional scholars. Questions about the unchecked growth of AI, the privacy of citizens, and the potential for unaccountable decision-making systems reached fever pitch. Could a private entity really be trusted to wield this much power? What about the rights guaranteed by the Constitution? Rights to privacy, due process, free will. At the heart of the storm was a simple yet profound dilemma: how to balance revolutionary technology with the foundational principles that upheld a free society. The government, responding to mounting pressure, sought to impose strict regulatory frameworks on AI development, arguing that Musk's Neuralite posed a threat to constitutional rights. New legislation was fast-tracked, aiming to severely limit autonomous AI operations without direct federal oversight. Musk, famously defiant, refused compliance. Instead, he sued, claiming that the government's regulations stifled innovation and infringed upon the rights of private enterprises and individuals to advance technology freely. What began as a legal technicality quickly escalated into a constitutional showdown. The lawsuit reached unprecedented heights, ultimately landing in a special court where none other than Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett was called to preside. Though it was rare for a sitting Supreme Court justice to oversee such a case outside the traditional high court setting, the complexity and stakes of the issue demanded unparalleled judicial authority. The battle lines were starkly drawn. On one side stood Musk, embodying the spirit of progress and rebellion against what he viewed as government overreach. His supporters, a sprawling mix of technologists, entrepreneurs, and libertarians, argued that innovation should not be shackled by outdated legal frameworks. They believed Musk was fighting not just for Neuralite, but for the future of human achievement. On the other side stood Amy Coney Barrett, representing the gravity of constitutional law, the safeguard of public interest, and the necessity of order in a democratic society. Her supporters, traditionalists, civil rights activists, and constitutional purists, saw the unchecked power of AI as a fundamental risk to freedom, privacy, and the rule of law. In their eyes, Barrett wasn't opposing progress. She was ensuring that progress didn't come at the cost of human rights. The nation, and indeed much of the world, watched from the sidelines, split down the middle. Was Musk a visionary being stifled by bureaucracy, or a reckless innovator blinded by ambition? Was Barrett a protector of liberty, or an impediment to the necessary evolution of human society? In a trial destined to set precedents for generations to come, the stakes had never been higher. Every argument, every piece of evidence, every word spoken in that courtroom had the potential to reshape the very definition of freedom in the age of technology. Amy Coney Barrett had spent her career weaving herself into the fabric of American constitutional law. Rising through the ranks of academia and judiciary with a kind of quiet precision, she was a scholar before she was a judge, a thinker before she was a symbol. As a professor at Notre Dame Law School, she became known for her brilliance, clarity of thought, and unwavering commitment to the originalist school of constitutional interpretation. The belief that the Constitution should be understood as it was intended at the time it was written. She wasn't one to be swayed by political pressure or popular trends. For her, the law was a fixed star, not a drifting cloud. When she ascended to the Supreme Court, her confirmation hearings were marked by sharp partisan divides. Yet even her critics acknowledged her formidable intellect. Over the years, Amy had cultivated a reputation as an unflinching guardian of constitutional boundaries. Her legal philosophy, rooted in textualism, the idea that the law should be interpreted based on its actual text, not the imagined intentions behind it, was both her shield and her sword. Calm under pressure, methodical in her reasoning, she was the kind of judge who believed that personal feelings should never, ever cloud legal judgment. In this courtroom, Amy represented more than just herself. She symbolized the weight of centuries of legal tradition, the careful balance that protected individual freedoms against both government overreach and unchecked private ambition. Her presence at the bench was a reminder that, no matter how fast the world moved, some principles were designed to endure. Across the courtroom, standing in stark contrast to that judicial stoicism, was Elon Musk, the very embodiment of the future breaking through the present. Musk's career had been nothing short of meteoric. Founder of Zip2, then PayPal, and eventually the visionary force behind Tesla and SpaceX, he had built an empire on dreams that most dismissed as impossible. Electric cars that could outperform gasoline engines, rockets that could land themselves, plans to colonize Mars. Neuralink, a company dedicated to integrating the human brain with machines, had only cemented his place as one of the most ambitious minds of the era. Musk's guiding philosophy was simple yet radical. Innovation should never wait for permission. Regulation to him was often a necessary evil, but one that needed to evolve quickly or risk strangling progress altogether. He operated on the edge of risk, where failure was frequent but never final. While governments hesitated, Musk acted. While others debated ethics and safety, Musk pushed prototypes into the world to be tested in real time. To his supporters, he was a pioneer of a better tomorrow. To his critics, a reckless force of disruption. In court, Musk was not the stereotypical billionaire hiding behind a team of lawyers. He was animated, articulate, and surprisingly well-versed in legal theory, a skill born of necessity after years of navigating regulations, lawsuits, and high-stakes corporate battles. He framed his arguments not just around profit, but around humanity's need to evolve. In his mind, technology wasn't just a tool, it was a lifeline to survival in an increasingly unstable world. The contrast between Musk and Barrett could not have been more profound. Where Amy saw stability and tradition as the guardians of freedom, Elon saw them as barriers to be reimagined or dismantled. Where Amy moved with caution and deliberation, Musk charged ahead with audacity and vision. Each represented a different idea of what America, and indeed the world, could and should be. As the trial loomed ahead, it was clear that this was no simple legal proceeding. It was a clash of philosophies, of worldviews, two giants standing firm in their truths, each believing they were fighting not just for themselves, but for the soul of the future. The gavel struck sharply against the wood, silencing the last murmurs of the packed courtroom. Cameras clicked, pens poised midair, the world holding its breath as Coney Barrett leaned forward. Her robe, dark and unadorned, framed a face carved with quiet authority. She scanned the room once, her eyes resting momentarily on Elon Musk, who sat at the defense table, relaxed but alert, his fingers steepled in front of him. When Amy spoke, her voice was calm but carried an undeniable weight, each word placed with the precision of a master craftsman. "We gather today not to stifle progress," she began, her gaze steady, "but to determine whether the trajectory of innovation has veered beyond the guardrails set forth by the Constitution of the United States. It is not the brilliance of invention that is on trial, but the necessity of preserving the liberties upon which this nation was founded." She paused, letting the words sink in. A few reporters scribbled furiously. "The framers of our Constitution," she continued, "envisioned a system where power, no matter how well-intentioned, would be checked and balanced. Technological advancement, while vital, must not be permitted to erode the fundamental rights of privacy, autonomy, and due process. We are here not to fear the future, but to ensure it remains bound by the rule of law." With that, she concluded, setting her notes down with a finality that seemed to echo through the room. The message was clear. The court would not be dazzled by innovation at the expense of principle. All eyes shifted to Musk. He stood slowly, unhurried, as if savoring the moment. His suit was impeccably tailored, but his stance was anything but traditional. Hands in his pockets, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, he looked more like a man about to pitch a revolutionary idea to investors than a defendant standing trial. "Your Honor," Musk began, voice steady but filled with a hint of mischief, "I appreciate the gravity with which you approach this case. I only wish the Constitution could have anticipated neural networks, machine consciousness, and a civilization on Mars." A ripple of laughter moved through the gallery, quickly hushed by a sharp glance from Barrett. Musk pressed on, undeterred. "The Constitution, in its brilliance, was designed to empower the individual, to resist centralized control, and to foster a society where innovation could flourish. The founders didn't imagine a Tesla Roadster orbiting the Earth, but they absolutely envisioned a world where progress was not dictated by fear." He stepped forward, his words gaining rhythm. "Neuralite isn't about violating rights, it's about extending them. Imagine AI diagnosing cancer at a stage no human could detect, or preventing accidents before they happen. Restricting this technology because of hypothetical fears would be like banning electricity because it might shock someone." For a moment, even the most skeptical observers couldn't help but feel the pull of his vision. Then came the first real clash. Barrett leaned slightly forward, her expression sharpening. "Mr. Musk," she said evenly, "you invoke the spirit of the Constitution, yet you propose allowing autonomous systems to make decisions without direct human oversight. Who in your vision will bear responsibility when these machines err?" Musk didn't flinch. "Accountability structures can and must exist," he replied, "but to paralyze innovation because perfection isn't guaranteed, that would be a betrayal of the very spirit that built this country." Barrett arched an eyebrow. "Spoken like a philosopher, yet the law does not thrive on philosophy alone. It thrives on responsibility, on tangible protections, not theoretical benefits." Musk nodded thoughtfully, then countered with surprising legal depth. "If I may, Your Honor, Marbury versus Madison established that it is the duty of the judiciary to say what the law is, not what it should fear it might become. Regulation should address actual harm, not speculative threats. To do otherwise is to legislate through fear rather than through fact." A few members of the audience shifted in their seats. That was not the response they had expected. Barrett's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in anger, but in recognition. Musk had done his homework. He wasn't merely a rogue entrepreneur swinging from gut instinct. He had studied the foundations, the precedents, the language of the law itself. The first real sparks had been struck. Both sides realized almost simultaneously that this battle would not be won through bluster or tradition alone. It would be fought point by point, like a grandmaster chess match, with strategy, precision, and relentless will. As Barrett called a brief recess, the world outside erupted into speculation. Inside, however, a much quieter realization took root. This was going to be a battle for the ages. The courtroom returned from recess humming with renewed energy. Whispers passed like electric currents between the rows of spectators. Something unspoken lingered in the air, a sense that the calm, strategic opening had only been the prelude. Now the real storm would begin. Justice Amy Coney Barrett resumed her seat at the bench, her expression unreadable, yet unmistakably more focused. She adjusted her glasses slightly and nodded toward the prosecution table. Moments later, an assistant rolled in a sleek cart carrying several thick binders, each meticulously tabbed and labeled. Barrett's voice sliced through the courtroom. Mr. Musk, while you argue the future should not be paralyzed by fear, there remain immediate, present concerns that demand this court's attention. With deliberate care, she lifted a binder and flipped it open, revealing a stack of documents. Contracts, internal memos, regulatory reports, all bearing the unmistakable logos of Musk's companies, Neuralite, Tesla, SpaceX. Over the past 5 years, Barrett continued, her tone cool and deliberate, your enterprises have repeatedly engaged in activities that circumvented federal oversight, compromised public safety protocols, and violated statutes designed to protect consumer privacy. In one instance, Neuralite's beta test phase 2, subjects' brainwave data was harvested without their explicit, informed consent, breaching both federal HIPAA regulations and state-level medical privacy laws. A low gasp rippled through the room. Musk's legal team shifted uncomfortably. And that, Barrett added sharply, is just the beginning. She set the binder down with a heavy thud, the sound resonating like a gavel of its own. Musk stood slowly. His expression remained impassive, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Not panic, but calculation. Your Honor, Musk began smoothly, I appreciate the detailed work presented. Truly. He turned, pacing slowly as he spoke, hands clasped behind his back like a professor addressing a lecture hall. But may I point out, the statutes you reference, while relevant to traditional medical research, are not explicitly designed to address synthetic cognitive enhancement frameworks. The room stiffened. Even seasoned legal scholars in attendance furrowed their brows. Musk continued, now pulling a thin folder from his counsel's desk. In preparation for this trial, we uncovered federal and state-level legislative histories that suggest ambiguity in the application of current privacy and research laws to advance neural interfaces. He held up a document for the court to see, a dusty, overlooked piece of legislative text from the early 2000s, dealing with cybernetic prosthetics and adaptive AI, passed long before Neuralink or Neuralite had even been conceptualized. In other words, Musk said, turning back toward Barrett, the existing legal frameworks fail to define where biological data collection ends and cognitive augmentation begins. Without clear definitions, enforcement becomes constitutionally questionable. The courtroom buzzed with sudden, chaotic energy. Reporters practically leapt from their seats. Legal experts whispered urgently among themselves. Musk hadn't just found a minor oversight. He had dug up a gaping hole in regulatory law, one that could shift the entire case's foundation. Justice Barrett's face remained stoic, but her fingers tapped lightly against the bench, a small but unmistakable sign that she, too, recognized the complexity Musk had just introduced. Outside, the media frenzy exploded. News vans lined the streets, anchors breathlessly reporting the latest development. Is Elon Musk outsmarting the system? Barrett holds her ground, but Musk shifts the legal terrain. Titan clash. Who's winning in the courtroom? Drama of the century. Social media went into overdrive, with hashtags like #Musk versus Barrett and #Legal Battle trending globally. Memes flooded the internet, some depicting Musk as a courtroom chess master, others portraying Barrett as a stern general holding the line against the chaos of unchecked technology. Back inside the courthouse, the balance of power had tilted, but not yet fallen. Amy Coney Barrett leaned forward slightly, her voice steady when she spoke again. Very well, Mr. Musk. You've raised serious questions regarding legislative clarity. This court will hear your argument fully. But understand, ambiguity in the law does not automatically nullify its spirit. Be prepared to demonstrate beyond clever citations how your innovations serve not merely your interests, but the public good. Musk offered a slight, almost imperceptible bow of respect. The stage was set for an even fiercer battle. The stakes had just risen, and neither side showed any signs of backing down. The courtroom's atmosphere, once electric with the thrill of argument, softened into something heavier, something more human. Musk stood silently for a moment before speaking again. Gone was the playful arrogance, the swagger of a tech billionaire. In its place was a rare, stripped-down honesty. When I first tried to launch Tesla, he began, his voice quieter but carrying no less weight, I was laughed out of nearly every investor meeting. Banks wouldn't touch me. Regulators thought electric cars were a fantasy, a niche product at best. They told me to stay in my lane, to build something realistic. He paused, hands loosely folded in front of him, looking almost small against the imposing walls of the courtroom. SpaceX was worse. I spent my last cent trying to build rockets that kept blowing up. The government told me aerospace was for giants, not for kids with wild ideas. But I couldn't stop. I still believe, that if we don't push boundaries, we don't survive. He looked toward Justice Barrett, not pleading, but asking to be understood. And now with Neuralite, I face the same walls, the same fear of the unknown. I'm not here to dismantle the law, Your Honor. I'm here because if we let fear dictate the future, we won't have one. For a long, charged moment, no one spoke. Even the reporters seemed unsure whether to write or simply listen. Across the bench, Amy Coney Barrett remained composed, yet something subtle shifted behind her eyes. Though she gave no outward sign, memories stirred quietly. Memories of her own journey, the long nights poring over case law, the skepticism she faced as a woman rising through the deeply traditional corridors of American law. She too had once been told to know her place, to tread carefully, to fit within a mold carved by others. She studied Musk, weighing not just his arguments but the vulnerability he had offered. For a heartbeat, the fierce clash between progress and preservation melted away, revealing two very human stories. Two people who, in their own ways, had fought the impossible to stand where they stood now. The audience, sensing this unspoken connection, shifted emotionally. Sympathy flowed toward both figures, not for their power, but for their perseverance. The battle would continue, but something fundamental had changed. The final day of the trial dawned beneath an overcast sky, the courthouse looming against the pale morning light like a monument to centuries of law and order. Inside, the tension was almost unbearable. The gallery packed tighter than ever, journalists straining over one another for a glimpse, a quote, a headline. Elon Musk took the stand first, a calm yet undeniable fire burning behind his eyes. Gone was the casual charm. What remained was pure conviction. Your Honor, he began, laws are living structures. They must adapt or risk suffocating the very progress they were meant to protect. He paced slowly before the bench, speaking not just to Barrett, but to everyone in the room and beyond it. Consider this, he said, gesturing to the future hanging in the balance. The Constitution was a revolutionary document because it embraced the idea of human potential, not because it limited it. Neuralite, AI, cognitive enhancements. These aren't threats to freedom. They are the next chapter in human evolution. The law must grow with us, or it becomes the greatest obstacle we face. The room held its breath as Musk let the silence stretch, every word carving deep into the collective consciousness. Amy Coney Barrett sat unmoving, a living embodiment of judicial steadiness. Yet even she could not deny the force of Musk's words. She waited, perfectly still, allowing the tension to crest before she responded, measured, deliberate. Mr. Musk, she said, her voice like iron wrapped in velvet, The Constitution is not a machine to be upgraded when inconvenient. It is the bedrock upon which all progress must rest. Without principles, due process, privacy, accountability, innovation is not freedom. It is chaos dressed in opportunity. She rose slightly from her chair, standing in a rare, commanding gesture that filled the courtroom with her presence. The law must be interpreted with wisdom, yes, but it must also guard against those who would trade human dignity for technological expediency. The air crackled with the clash of ideologies, neither side yielding an inch. And then came the final cross-examination, a duel sharp enough to cut the very fabric of the room. Barrett leaned forward. Tell this court, Mr. Musk, if Neuralite's AI decides who receives critical medical care and who does not, who answers when it errs? A machine? A programmer? Or no one at all? Musk met her gaze directly. The same way human doctors are accountable now, through rigorous standards, review boards, and continuous oversight. Only faster, smarter, and more accurate. Human error kills thousands annually. Machines can save those lives, if we allow them to. Barrett pressed again, sharper. And if the machine discriminates, who faces justice? Musk smiled faintly. We build systems to detect bias, Your Honor. We build better systems, just like we refine the law itself over time. The final exchange was electric, a collision of ideals so intense the room seemed to vibrate with it. When closing arguments came, they were not shouted but delivered like precision strikes, each word chosen with the care of a poet or a surgeon. Musk spoke of humanity's need to dream bigger, to build boldly, to trust that their better angels would guide technology toward salvation rather than destruction. Barrett spoke of the sacred responsibility to protect freedoms, not just for today, but for generations unborn, of the peril in trading safety for speed, principle for convenience. The jury of public opinion, spread across millions of screens worldwide, leaned forward, hanging on every sentence, every pause, every glint of steel in Barrett's eyes, and every flicker of passion in Musk's voice. By the time both rested their cases, the courtroom felt like the eye of a storm, a stillness so profound it rang louder than any applause. The battle was over. Judgment awaited. But regardless of the outcome, one thing was certain. History had been made in that room, between two giants who, in their collision, had illuminated the very soul of a society, standing on the razor's edge between past and future. The courtroom was so silent that the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed deafening. Every person, from the front row to the reporters squeezed against the walls, leaned in as Justice Amy Coney Barrett prepared to deliver her ruling. She glanced once at Musk, once at the audience, and then began. This court finds, she said, voice clear and even, that while Mr. Musk's enterprises push the boundaries of innovation, they operate in a space where current law offers insufficient clarity. It is not within this court's purview to legislate new standards, but it is also not this court's role to stifle forward momentum rooted in constitutional freedoms. A beat passed, a sharp intake of breath from somewhere in the crowd. Accordingly, the court rules for a conditional settlement. Neuralite may continue its operations under a provisional framework, subject to strict oversight, transparency requirements, and immediate congressional review to ensure that constitutional rights are preserved. The words fell like thunder. Neither a full victory for Musk nor a strict defeat from Barrett, but something much rarer, an acknowledgement that the future was too big for old battles alone. New lines needed to be drawn, but not by fear or blind ambition. They would be shaped together, with caution and courage walking side by side. Musk blinked once, absorbing the weight of the judgment. Then slowly he nodded, a small, respectful gesture toward the bench. For all his rebellion, he knew a landmark moment when he stood in one. Barrett, for her part, gave the faintest incline of her head in return. No celebration, no scolding, only mutual recognition. Two fierce forces who had fought not for ego, but for something larger. Outside, the world erupted. Headlines blazed across every news site. Musk scores conditional victory against government limits. Justice Barrett balances future and freedom in landmark ruling. Musk vias Barrett trends as internet explodes over court decision. Memes flooded timelines within minutes. Musk depicted as a courtroom cowboy riding a robotic horse. Barrett standing like a constitutional knight guarding the gates of tradition. Debates raged across late-night shows, podcasts, and dinner tables. Was Musk's freedom to innovate the key to survival, or a dangerous game with unpredictable consequences? Had Barrett wisely contained the risks, or had she blinked in the face of progress? Yet amid the noise, one image stood out. A simple photograph snapped in the courtroom hallway just after the ruling. Musk and Barrett, passing one another, sharing a rare, quiet smile. Not as enemies, but as equals who had met in battle, tested each other, and, in doing so, pushed the world just a little further forward. History, it seemed, was not always made by winners and losers. Sometimes it was made by those brave enough to stand on the edge together. In the end, the clash between Elon Musk and Amy Coney Barrett was not simply about technology or the law. It was a collision of two essential forces: the drive to push humanity beyond its current limits, and the solemn duty to anchor that ambition within the protections hard-won over centuries. Innovation without principles could spiral into chaos. Tradition without adaptation could lead to stagnation. Great societies, history showed, were those that learned not to crush one force in favor of the other, but to walk the narrow path where ambition and responsibility held each other in delicate balance. Musk had reminded the world that human progress demands risk, imagination, and the courage to build the unimaginable. Barrett had reminded it that even the grandest visions must respect the dignity and rights of individuals, lest freedom itself become the first casualty of unchecked advancement. In a world racing toward a future no one could fully predict, it was clear that the question was never should we move forward, but rather how do we move forward wisely. As Musk left the courthouse, reporters pressed him for a final comment. He paused, glanced back once toward the courtroom, and simply said, "The future belongs to those bold enough to dream and wise enough to remember why it matters." Justice Barrett, hearing of the remark later, only smiled and replied quietly to her clerk, "Dreams build the future. Laws protect it." The final image lingers. The once crowded courtroom now empty, chairs pushed back, papers scattered like echoes of a battle fought with words and ideals. The camera slowly pulls back, rising higher, the grand marble halls shrinking until they seem almost fragile under the vastness of the sky. Outside, life moves on. Reporters pack up their gear. Lawyers slip into waiting cars. Somewhere, a Neuralite server hums quietly, a pulse of the future already in motion. Somewhere else, a judge pens a lecture on the timeless resilience of the law. The screen darkens, the world caught between the known and the unknown. A voice calm and reflective breaks the silence. In a world racing toward tomorrow, who really wins? The dreamers or the guardians? The final frame flickers, a blurred image of Musk walking toward a horizon bathed in light, and Barrett turning back toward the pillars of the courthouse. Two paths, two visions, both necessary. Fade out. Roll credits.